Thank you. Welcome back to another episode of the Just Jamie podcast. And if you're new here, welcome. But if you have been around a while, you knew my confession that I listen to about 8 hours of sports talk radio every day. And I am so excited to welcome in Chris Carlin, my personal favorite, Emmy Award-winning host on ESPN, voice of Rutgers football since 2004, and probably most importantly, the son-in-law of not one but two Ohio State graduates.
This is true. This
So
is very
welcome
true.
and thank you, a million thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
See, now I probably have to get the Rutgers helmet a little bit more in the shot
Oh,
so that everybody can see it. But yeah, I do have my in-laws are Ohio State Buckeyes, born and grew up in Columbus. So yeah, I hear about the Buckeyes all the time.
I
For sure.
bet. And it's probably the first time you've ever been introduced as the son-in-law of Ohio State graduates. But we'll move on to other things, maybe. But were they so excited about the Natty?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely, and they are emotional fans. They live in Northern California right now,
Oh, okay.
and have for many years. But they will absolutely turn on a dime on a series of, oh, they're terrible, I can't watch this too. Oh, they're going to win the whole thing. So, yeah, I mean, when they lost to Michigan, I think they were thinking about driving to Columbus themselves to get rid of Ryan Day. But at the same time, you know, they're such fun people and great sports fans. And it's funny, just to give you a quick, idea of what that was like. The first time, my wife and I had been dating for probably about a year and a half or so.
Okay.
And I had a bye week with Rutgers, so we went to Ohio State, and we saw her grandparents were living out in Columbus, and her grandmother had been dealing with Alzheimer's for a long time, and unfortunately, while we were there, she passed away.
Oh, no.
And so we went to the game, but her folks didn't want to tell us until after the game.
Oh, okay.
And so when we left and were walking back to the car, her father called, let us know what was going on. And he said, "Can I talk to Chris?" And I'm thinking, okay, he wants me to help set up, anything that while we're on the ground here, any kind of, services or whatever they're doing, whatever I can do at that point.
Right.
And his first question was, "How was the game? What did you think of the game?" And he was asking me all about it. And, it's just funny. They're very passionate people, and their grandparents would not have had it. Cheryl's grandparents.
Well,
my
that's
wife,
what I
would
was
not have
wondering.
had it
That's
any
the
other
best
way.
thing he could do to honor, right? And
Oh,
was that your first
absolutely.
time in the horseshoe?
It was.
Okay.
It was. Yeah, they beat Iowa 31-6. And
Okay.
I remember two things. Santonio Holmes was flying down the field, and I remember Nick Mangold was just mangling everybody.
That's so crazy. You remember the final score and everything.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's great.
Yep.
You're like my husband. Like he'll remember a round of golf like 15 years ago. He's like, yeah, I parred that hole, and then 7 hours. I'm like, oh, okay, but he doesn't remember like anything I might have said the day before.
Oh yeah. No, I don't remember anything that was said yesterday or even this morning. But yeah,
Exactly.
that I remember.
All right, so this is why I like you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my hot take, and then we'll move on from Ohio State, is that I know we just lost our defensive coordinator to Penn State, but here's my hot take, is that I know he's a Pennsylvania native, and but I think Franklin's on the hot seat. And I think just like Luke Fickell kind of, slid in with Ohio State issues, I think if Franklin gets bounced mid-season next year, he'll be up for taking over as even interim. So that's my hot take.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. For Franklin, it was something that he had to do. I mean, he has developed some terrific defensive players over the years, but what's the knock? He's never winning the big game. And so he has to do everything possible, and this accomplishes two things. It takes away an Ohio State strength from this past year, although, I'm sure they'll end up being fine. But it certainly enhances his defense even a little bit more after he lost Tom Allen. So I think that there's definitely the possibility that if he ever, was going to get bounced at Penn State, that Jim Knowles would get a chance.
So you heard it here first.
Okay.
Just for the record, write it down. Exactly. Yeah.
You got it.
So when we were scheduling this episode too, I was sort of half kidding that we might have Pete Alonso news to break, and sure enough, so he signed. And we don't need to go into that, but do I remember that you grew up as a Mets fan, and then when Seaver was traded, you defected to the Texas Rangers? Does that make me a stalker or no?
Yeah, it wasn't Seaver.
Oh, okay.
It was Mookie Wilson.
Oh,
So I
yes.
was a huge Met fan, and when Seaver was traded, I mean, you're dating me a little bit there. I'm not that old. I grew up with the Mets in the 80s.
All right, so 86 is my heart,
Right.
that's okay. I know we're
Right.
not that far apart in age, but I wasn't sure if like you worshipped at the altar of Seaver like so many kids did. Because you must have just been a baby.
I became a Met fan in 81-ish,
Okay.
82. I was like 9 or 10.
Okay.
And, watched them on TV religiously. And Mookie Wilson was my guy. And I
Yeah.
just absolutely loved him. And I can remember very specific, just getting so pumped up by the fact that they were starting to get better because they were terrible when I became a fan. And when they traded for Keith Hernandez, I made two of my older brothers take me to Shea for his first home game.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, stuff like that. So I absolutely loved them. They obviously won in 86. They lost to the Dodgers in 88. But my dad held me out of school for opening day in 85, which was Gary Carter's first day. But yeah,
That's
I
awesome.
absolutely loved them. And then they traded Mookie. And coincidentally, I had a brother, Steve. I have 4 brothers and a sister. And this brother had just moved down to Texas. And we
Okay.
went to a bunch of games, and nobody went to the Rangers games at the time.
Right.
Nobody. And so we were sitting like right behind the dugout with our feet up on the dugout. So I started following them, and I kind of had a thing about rooting for the loser in baseball for the longest time. So that's how that happened.
And that has stuck for you, right? You're still.
It did. Yeah, it did.
Okay.
It did. Like, I still have a picture over behind me of Corey Seager homering last year in Game 1 of the World Series.
Okay, okay.
But yes, that one did stick for me.
Yeah.
I still, I didn't hate the Mets for trading them, but I just didn't have the same.
No, I appreciate a man that can hold a grudge, because I find that certainly as a kid, I was so much about the team, but certainly as a grown up now, at least I pretend to be on TV, that like it's hard when there's either violence against women or I have zero tolerance for drunk drivers. Like it's hard just to root for the laundry when there's some just like bad guys. Like I stopped watching people in the home design world because they didn't speak up during the Baylor sex scandal, and I just like they're dead to me, because I just think I understand winning is paramount, but like when you have literal horrible people, it's tough just to root for the laundry. It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I'm also a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and I became one in that same time frame because I had an oldest brother who went to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And with Ben Roethlisberger, it was the same kind of thing for me. The first time it happened, you want to hope, all right, it was a misunderstanding or something like that. And, it happens a second time, like, how do I root for this guy? I literally got rid of the jersey, and it's not that I didn't root for the team. I just never took any joy from anything that he did because, listen, I don't know what happened there, but I also know that like these things are not coincidental when it happens more than once. And I tend to believe women when it comes to these kinds of things. So,
Yeah, and that's why I get so upset when, my dad was a police officer, so nothing annoys me more than bad cops. And when women fake things or, lie, quite frankly, like all they're doing is hurting all of the past victims to come. And I think, just to turn a blind, that's why I was so hoping that I'm a Jets fan, God help me. But I was really pulling for the Lions because, I've seen a lot of quotes from the ownership that they want high quality people. And I find that just much more attractive as an adult, where if I'm going to spend my dollars, like, Aaron Rodgers, if I hear one more story, I'm going to put my pen in my eye. But I don't think he's necessarily a bad guy. But I don't want to start saying on the sliding scale of criminality, I could root for this guy. Like, if sports are supposed to be my escape, I don't want to have to be like, well, how many felonies does this guy have? And it just gets a bit much as a fan to sort of wonder about these folks. So it's just
It's frustrating, Jamie, because I love sports so much. And granted, this happens all over society.
right.
But you're right. It is supposed to be our escape. I have always felt like for my career, I kind of live in the sandbox. And when that stuff comes up, it's so easy to be disappointed. And it just doesn't, it's not anything where I can ever pretend to know
Right.
what the experience is that women go through with it. And I'm just so disappointed in men. And you're right, it gets very difficult to root for people who you actively would just never like.
Yeah, and I get pissed at women too that, like, there's this cliche of, oh, well, anybody can date somebody who's rich, or they go after athletes just for the money. And I think there's a lot of women that put themselves out in ways that I'm not necessarily proud of, chasing fame or chasing money and things like that, where it doesn't. I just think they have to represent a little bit better. That if you wind up, just chasing athletes and putting them in a position, to sort of, catch them doing something. I get mad at women too, because, at the end of the day, there's bad guys, but I also think there's a lot of women out there who are not necessarily, being fine, upstanding citizens themselves. So I think it cuts both ways. And I feel bad because sometimes athletes do have a bit of a target on their back. But when you are just a bad guy, I can't, sort of pull for that. But and if you'll allow me a moment just to sort of gush about you, is the reason I appreciate you're funny, you're self-deprecating, you're super smart. It's a really entertaining show, any show that you've been on. But what I appreciate, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners, is that you're willing to sort of be vulnerable. And you talk about your brothers and, the baldness that runs in the family. And your one brother wore like a hair hat that he got mocked for.
Yeah.
And, I am so sorry that you just lost your mom. And you were so open about how, like, the healthcare costs in New Jersey were skyrocketing and you had to move her to Iowa, and that heart-wrenching. And it was like, you always get back to the candy store or the sandbox. But I think a lot of people listening can really, like, our heart broke for your family and having to make the decision to sort of move your mom because you can't really afford to mind them. And like you said, she wasn't in the Taj Mahal either.
No.
So as a thank you for all the people who you entertain every day, like your willingness to be vulnerable, like you're a man who loves scented candles. You had your wedding reception at a pizza place. And, I think you're just open and vulnerable and, super smart at what you do, but also willing to let people in a little bit. So I know I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that, Jamie. I mean, it sounds so cliche and such, but when I first started being on the air at WFAN in New York, early 2000s, my bosses just thought I was terrible, really, because I was so worried about, just making sure I knew all the facts and didn't get
Right.
caught off guard by
Okay.
anything and all that kind of thing, as opposed to just kind of having fun. And I remember, like, it had gone so poorly so many times that I got a couple of more chances, and I just said, you know what, this isn't going to work anyway. So I'm just going to go in and screw around and have fun with the callers. And that's what I did. And that next day, my boss was like, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I want. And so since then, I know, like, it's such a cliche for people to say, be yourself. But quite literally, I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am if I didn't just let the inner idiot of me out. And it, like, we're laughing about it, but I quite literally have lived by this with any partner I've worked with or with any show I've done. If you let me be an idiot, we're going to be fine. We're going to have fun. It's going to be good, and we'll be okay. And that really has worked for me. But it's also just about, hey, I think specifically radio, is a very personal medium because you're in the car with somebody, they feel like they're with your friends and just hanging out. And we all go through stuff. You know, we
Yeah.
all go through different things. And yeah, it was a difficult couple of years. My mom was older. She was 91. But she had never. I'd lost my father when I was 15. He was 60 at the time, and that was back in 1988. So
Oh, boy.
she was around for a long time after he passed away. But it was staggering. We were fortunate in that she had a very good long-term care policy, but when it was getting to $12,000 and $13,000 a month, and like I said, you know, she did not have personal butlers and any of that kind of
Right.
stuff. You know, it was just an average place that we did the best on. You know, we moved her to Iowa, and my brother Jim, who lives there, and my sister-in-law did an unbelievable job in helping to care for her at the places that we had out there. My sister-in-law in particular just was off the charts great, and we lost her in September, but she was ready, and it was an interesting experience because you know, she had some dementia, and you know, I saw her last in July, but I also you know, I hadn't really seen the woman that I knew in a really long time.
Okay.
So it was difficult. It was. It's always difficult to lose somebody, but at the same time, I don't know. Maybe I just had been kind of mourning it over a period of time already.
Right,
You know?
right.
So I'm just happy for her that she was not suffering in any way.
Right,
So that's
right.
what's the most important thing to us.
Now, did your mom know you would end up in sports radio? Did you sort of always know this? Like, what was?
No. So as I said, I have 4 older brothers. My parents had 5 kids in 6.5 years, and then they had me 8 years later.
Surprise!
So I was not in the plans. I was the oops, right? I went to college thinking that I wanted to be a lawyer. 2 of my older brothers were lawyers,
Okay.
and you know, oh, it's a nice car, and you've got to make nice money, and all this stuff. And then,
Right.
so I went to Hobart College in upstate New York, and I thought that's what I want to do. And then I took a couple of classes that were not even only tangentially related to it, and I'm like, nope, they want you to work. That's not going to work. So I just kind of fell into it. So it's I won't take up too much on it, but it's just a funny story
Yeah.
to me. When I had always been a huge sports fan,
Okay.
always, growing up. And when I worked, or when I was on my freshman dorm floor, there was a kid, I'll never forget his name, it was Josh Lytle, came up to me. He worked at the radio station, the campus radio station, and said, "You like sports, right?" I'm like, yeah. You know anything about football? "Yeah, a decent amount. I played like PAL." And apparently the guy who was the color commentator on the student station there,
Okay.
as a former player, the night before, had gone to a bar downtown, just got ugly drunk and was being a real jerk.
Okay.
And a bunch of people had just had enough of him. And somebody goes up behind him, and he's standing at the bar and just pull down his pants. And he turns around and punches the first person he sees. And it's an off-duty cop. And so that's not bad luck. That's dumb luck.
Oh.
Yeah. So needless to say, he was asked to not return to the broadcast, and they needed somebody pretty quickly. And they ended up putting me on the sideline for Division III football,
Okay.
and for an awful team. And I just immediately fell in love with doing it. So
Were you like, are you kidding? You can get paid to do this, and this is a career?
yeah,
Like,
I never even listen. I knew of all the great broadcasters growing up,
Sure.
the Bob Costas, the Dick Enbergs, and all that, but they just seemed like these massive figures that
Right.
weren't even real people, you know?
Yeah.
They were just at these games. You didn't even think like that. And I started doing it. I was like, could this happen?
Right.
I don't know. And, you know, so I kind of wondered, do I transfer to a school that it kind of specializes in that? But
Okay.
there, I didn't, because at Hobart, like nobody really cared. And I
Right.
just kind of started to do all these sports with one or two other people. And I would listen to the guys on TV and on the radio and just kind of, okay, a little self-taught. And so, yeah, I just fell in love with it. I got some minor league baseball internships and did 3 years of minor league baseball
Okay.
before I
What is
graduated.
your first love? Would you say it's baseball announcing? Is it, I know you do basketball, you do football,
Yeah.
you do it all. So,
Yeah, I would say it's I would say it's football is my favorite
okay.
now. Baseball at one point certainly would have been back then. It certainly would have been. You know, for some, and it's not a knock on the Mets, but the 5 years I did Mets pre and post game on TV on SNY,
Yeah.
I kind of fell out of love with the game for a little while.
They'll do
with
that
it.
to you. We break spirit.
And but it wasn't even that it was the Mets.
Was it the
just more
Wilpons?
of like I don't know. Maybe I saw some of the behind the scenes stuff and all that I didn't love. But
You saw
at any rate,
like how the
I would
sausage
say,
was made, right? And you're like, they always say you don't want to know how the sausage is made.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love the television part of it. I never thought I was going to be in TV, and
Right.
I owe Fred Wilpon a lot because he saw me on the network a couple of times arguing about sports, and he liked the fact that I was kind of the everyman.
Okay.
And he wanted that represented on his network, and I thought that was, and
That's
like
pretty
so I
huge,
owe
yeah.
it to him. I really do.
Wow. Okay. That's a nugget I didn't know.
Yeah, no,
Now-
that's true.
In the broadcasting space, so I think this is universal, whether whoever's watching this loves sports radio or not, but I come from the retail world, and I've been saddled a time or two with someone that the company thought was the be all and end all. And they were a hack. They were a hack-a-doodle-doo. They were terrible at their job, yet they were the chosen one. Somebody had been recruited, and here they are in my orbit. And everyone else knows. So is there, and I don't want names, I'm not here to put you on the spot, but have you ever sort of been, gifted someone who is a hack, yet the mothership, whether it's ESPN or whoever, has sort of said this person is awesome, and like you're the only one, you're like, am I the only one that sees this person as a hack? Like, have you ever had that?
Not really.
Really?
Now that
Okay.
I as I think about it, no. When I was at WFAN, everybody was really talented, and it was that place was really the be all end all in New York.
Yeah.
And like even the people off the air, like had to work to be there.
Right.
They were not suffering people that didn't bust it. SNY on the air never felt that way.
Okay.
Never felt that way. ESPN never felt that way.
Is there ever a storyline that you're given or a narrative? Like, how much freedom do you have? So does someone say, like, whether it be Aaron Rodgers, whoever the it topic is, are you ever to the point where you're like, this is played out, but your producer's like, it'd be great, Chris, if you talked about this for 3 hours? Or do you can you go rogue, and do they sort of throw the ratings at you? Like, hey, we said to do this, you did that. Kind of like Aaron Boone, right? Is analytical.
When he's handed the lineup and stuff.
Well, either the lineup
Yeah.
or like when you're planning a show, do they sort of say, hey, it'd be great if you talked about this, and you think it's played out, you think it's run its course, or are you always kind of on the same page as your producer of what you think the hot topic is?
If you have a good producer, which I've always been fortunate enough to have, there's a trust. I'm a collaborative guy.
Okay.
I don't ever want to assume that I always know what's best. Now, sometimes I do. I come from being a producer as well, and I think that's kind of helped me too. They have never, none of the places I've worked has ever really wanted to spin a narrative, so to speak.
Okay.
There were times at SNY, because the team was owned by the Mets and the network was owned by the Mets, the Wilpons, where like it would be, okay, this happened. Whether it was an embarrassing thing or something happened or there was a bad trade or whatever, spin it forward. Now,
Gotcha.
now what
Now
from
what?
that?
Right.
Okay. It's not that we wouldn't talk about it. We
Right.
would, but they never said specifically, you cannot discuss
Okay.
this, at least to
Okay.
me. That never happened. I would say the one time that something like that happened was the night that they were rumored to have traded Wilmer Flores to the
Yes.
Brewers.
And he
Yep.
cried.
Yep. And he cried. And during the game and during the post game, they showed him crying, and they showed the dugout or in the locker room that he, had his locker cleaned out. And after the game, I was doing Sports Night that night, and they said, okay, we're not showing that anymore. We've shown that enough.
Right.
Okay. I mean, that's the only time something
Okay.
like that's ever happened. But as far as like, hey, it would be great if you did this or it would be great if you did that. No, it's more, I really, really value being in the collaborative environment. Some people love to work alone on things, and I can appreciate that, but that's not me. I would rather have a partner on the show. I would rather have really good people who are invested and that you trust their instincts, and you build up that trust. And I have been very fortunate. SNY, amazing producers. Same thing at ESPN. It's been
And teaming you with Bart, because he's a bit of a wild card, right? He's
yeah. So
And
Bart
you-
and I had obviously worked together
Yeah.
previously.
and you guys have such great chemistry, and I think I think you bring out the best that you let him sort of run wild, if you will, but you guys have such great chemistry that you sort of rein him in, or kind of get him back on track. Like, I can't imagine what a solo show with Bart Scott would be. But yeah, you guys have such great chemistry. And is that part of it, that you're kind of he trusts you, you're in his trust circle?
Definitely.
Yes.
Bart definitely trusts me.
Yeah.
And I trust him. And when he and I first met, I was honest with him right away. I'm like, listen, when you were playing, like, I was really critical of you toward the end, like, can't wait, more like can't tackle. And I told him, like, I had said that.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't care.
Right.
And then 5 minutes later, like, we were ordering a meal, and I remember specifically, like, I ordered egg whites, and he looked at me and he's like, who are you kidding? Egg whites, come, So I knew, all right, we're gonna be fine here.
And did he have his bag of condiments back then?
He still does.
Right.
It's amazing.
I'm sort of, because when I was running over the things I was going to talk about, my husband's like, he's going to get a restraining order because you know too much. And I was like, I just pay attention. So hopefully I'm not creeping you out.
Listen, it's, Bart has just been great between at FAN and here. We've only been back together for about a month and a half or so. At FAN, when I got cut loose, my contract ended. Bart's was up a couple of months later, and they wanted to keep him, and he left in part. And he said this publicly, which I really appreciated, and certainly would never expect anybody to do it.
Right.
He just said, I didn't like how they treated him, and in reference to me.
Yep.
And that really meant a lot to me. Bart is a guy that you want to have in your foxhole. My brother Steve calls them back alley people. That if you're facing it in a back alley somewhere, that guy is going to be standing right behind you. And Bart is one of those guys.
Yeah, everybody
Absolutely.
needs the person who'll help you bury the body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not ask a lot of questions.
Yes. If I called Bart at 3 a.m., he would show up.
He's
with
up for it. And he'll have like mayonnaise with him or something.
Yeah. No doubt.
But so working with former athletes, so sports betting is obviously huge now, right? It sponsors all the shows. It used to be like water cooler talk if, let's say, there was a bad call, but now people are betting play to play, game to game. The sports lines you never used to be able to mention on TV, and now the over under is right out there. They talk about it on the broadcast, but like bad officiating is now, sort of you said it on your IG live. Or Reel yesterday, saying that now Goodell is talking about, hey, do the Chiefs really get all the calls? So like betting now, it's not just, hey, it cost me $5 against my friend at the office. Now sports betting is big, and like crappy officiating is like. Do you think sports betting's gone too far? Do you feel like it's kind of muddying the waters a little bit, or?
I don't know if I would say it's muddying the waters. What I would say is that the legalization of it at least allowed for some guardrails. I think, listen, there were scandals before
Right.
it was legal, right? So I think that provides some guardrails. What I was talking about with Roger Goodell this week, there's the thought process that the Chiefs get all the calls, and it's good for business to have Patrick Mahomes, in the Super Bowl.
Right.
And my point this week was not only did Roger Goodell call it ridiculous, but the NFL Referees Association actually came out and spoke out about it too. Like, that's a lot of attention to pay to something the week of the big game. And so it just makes me think, because of what that narrative is, if there's a close play on Sunday, does that keep an official, when he's reaching for the flag, to not do that? And I think that benefits the Eagles here. Now, how sports betting ties into it, it's very simple to me. Their rules on it are clear cut, and they are not so restrictive, I think, to the athlete that it's untenable. Okay. Where you get into a dicey situation is where they can gamble on anything and they owe people money, and then, you're trying to dig out of a hole, and next thing you know, you're missing a couple of shots, things like that. Do I think that's rampant? I don't. Absolutely not. I think the one thing I do know about the NFL and about any of these leagues is that it is exceptionally important to keep the integrity of it intact, because when people start being given evidence that it's truly fake, or that there's something going on, they're going to lose interest in it.
Right. And that's why on your phone, and you can bet play to play, people, it only works if they think this isn't, wrestling. This isn't scripted. Like, they have to trust that they're making a good faith bet. And that's why I think it's so interesting that more people are now not just going to chit chat about it the next day. Like, they have money on the line. And, when Mahomes, kind of looks like he's going out of bounds, out the sideline, then doesn't, to pick up a couple extra yards, and, the slide and all that. Like, now it's, it's not just kind of makes you angry on one. I might have lost $100, and those are the kinds of things I think are interesting that years ago.
I do think what is interesting about that, Jamie, the most is that athletes now hear more than ever from people who lost money on them. Like in the jeers, and when they're yelling at them in the stadium.
In college now too,
social media. Absolutely. You cost me this, you cost me that. That's the one that bothers me a little bit more.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to let you go on a couple different fun little things. So golf, I know you're, quite the golfer. What is your favorite course you've ever played, and a bucket list one?
Oh, well, the bucket list for me is an easy one. It's Pebble Beach.
Okay.
The thing I love about, I am not a big private club guy.
Really? Because you totally give off that air.
People don't believe me when they say, hey, if you were given the chance to play Augusta, would you do it? And I wouldn't.
Right.
And the reason I wouldn't is because I know at Augusta, there may as well be a giant picture of me with a line through it. That's not a place that wants me around. So I don't want to do that. No, it's Pebble Beach. It's public course. It's expensive, obviously.
Well, somebody who played Spyglass terribly, in a monsoon once, and I had given Pebble Beach to my husband for his birthday, and I wasn't good. You need to do it, and it's well worth every penny. But sorry, you were saying you and your wife?
So I was saying that I have been waiting. I don't want to go do it until I get better.
No,
whatever. No, I got to go do it. Yeah, that's just all there is to it. So I will do that. My wife and I never forget, we had lunch right next to the 18th green, and I walked up there and checked it out. It was unbelievable. So
it's quite ridiculous, and you can't believe it's my screensaver on my phone all these years later is still that iconic shot right from the lodge, like right there with it's amazing. Don't wait till you're better, because I'm a horrible golfer, and it was when a monsoon, they even offered to refund us. That's how bad the weather was. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And I had hit a shot, and then the ranger he was like, oh, it's up here. I never thought to look for it on the green. Like, and I was like, get out. And so, I mean, I think my fingers are still prunes, but that was like my one holy grail. And I'm like, I should just quit now, walk away. Like when George Costanza was funny. He's like, all right, thanks very much. Exactly. All right. So
I would be one of those guys who like couldn't find the ball. Oh, did it go in the hole?
yeah, like that's the one zone I don't have to look. I was like, well, I know it's not there.
Yeah. I don't have one that I would say has been the best so far. Yeah. I don't really have one that
I think you would
like
love
that.
the Greenbrier in West Virginia because no, I think you would. I think because it's you have to be staying there, so it's slightly bougie, but it's West Virginia, and the people who own it are amazing. I think you would love it there, and
my in-laws
it's
have
quite
been there many times.
Oh, okay.
So they don't necessarily play golf, although I would say maybe one of the great places I played was Sea Island with them for their anniversary this past year.
Very nice.
They had us down there, yeah.
Okay, and I wouldn't be the intrepid reporter if I didn't ask you, what's your favorite scented candle?
I'm a simple vanilla guy.
Same. It's got. I love the smell of a cookie. Who doesn't love a cookie?
It's so funny. You know who really got me onto is Harry Douglas.
Is that right?
Harry Douglas has them all over his house. It's unbelievable. And so we used to, when we did shows together, we would joke around about that a lot. And he got us, a few years ago, my wife and I went away for weekend, and it was Super Bowl weekend, and it was at this place in the Bahamas. And Harry got us tickets to this Super Bowl party down there, just out of goodness of his heart. Wow. And so I sent him like scented candles. I'm trying to remember what I sent him, like what scent, but I sent him a bunch, and he's like, man, that was beautiful.
The gift, I was redoing the house because God forbid I don't move things around. And I'm like, I think I have a problem. Like I knew I had a pillow addiction, but the candle to like square foot ratio is a little off, and I won't apologize. I'm not going to.
No, that's fine. You got to explain the pillow thing to me.
You know what? I blame it on the retail. I was in luxury home furnishings for a really long time, and I'm a girl who loves accessories. I love bejewels, bejangles. If some is good, more is better. And the pillows, not so much on the decorative because the dog takes over the bed, but a properly karate chopped, sort of casual yet don't look at it pillow. It adds a little something something. I don't know what it is. I don't know. It's like the only girly thing about me. Because I often like everything that most women are into annoys me, but the pillow thing, I was like, I really am a girl, so that's my thing.
Like we don't have a ton of them around the house, but the ones that we do have, I'm like, do we never use this for anything?
But it adds so much ambiance to the room.
Yes, I guess.
It draws in colors. Oh, it happens. It does.
I like to think I had enough ambiance for everybody, so.
Well, I mean, that's the mic drop moment. You have to end the podcast on that. The ambiance, yes. But no, seriously, I'm just a girl that started a podcast because, I was the last person in the universe not to have a podcast. And I can't believe you said yes. And this just really means a lot to me. And I had so much fun.
Oh, listen, I appreciate you having me, Jamie. You've always been so supportive, and I really appreciate that very much.
Well, when I was out in literally the middle of nowhere and there was no radio stations, I was in, some mountainous town on a consulting job this summer, and I was hitting, scan, and I'm, listen to a Bible show every now and again, but I needed something. Then I heard your voice. I'm like, Chris Carlin. And I think I sent you a screenshot. I was like, there is civilization. So you've pulled me out of a spot here or there, but thank you. You're very kind to do this, and, much success on the new show. I'll be listening, as you know.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate it.
Well, have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.